The radio crackled to life at 0347 hours. But Staff Sergeant Maya Chen already knew what Captain Torres was going to tell her. The distant sound of helicopter rotors fading into the darkness had been her first clue. The second clue was the eerie silence that followed. Echo Base, this is Viper 1. Mission parameters have changed. Extraction point Alpha is compromised. All units fall back to secondary positions. Torres's voice carried that particular strain that meant everything had gone sideways fast. Maya pressed herself deeper into the rocky outcrop overlooking the valley floor. Below her, the small village of Kandahar lay quiet under a blanket of stars. Too quiet. 6 hours ago, intelligence had indicated this was a routine reconnaissance mission. Check for enemy movement, report back, extract at dawn. Simple. Nothing about this felt simple anymore. Copy that, Viper 1. Request immediate extraction at Bravo Point, Maya whispered into her comms, keeping her voice low despite being alone on this god-forsaken mountain. Static answered her, then more static. Viper 1, please respond. She adjusted her radio frequency, checking connections with practiced efficiency. Everything looked good on her end. The silence stretched on. Maya had been a communications specialist for 8 years before cross-training into reconnaissance. She knew the difference between equipment failure and deliberate radio silence. Her gear was working perfectly, which meant either her entire unit was dead or they had bigger problems than anyone had anticipated. She pulled out her field glasses and scanned the extraction point 3 kilometers north. Through the green glow of night vision, she could see the landing zone clearly. What she saw made her stomach drop. Armed vehicles. At least 6 of them, arranged in a perfect ambush formation around the designated landing site. Whoever these people were, they had known exactly where the extraction was supposed to happen. Maya lowered her glasses and considered her options. She carried enough supplies for a 3-day mission. Water for 48 hours if she was careful. Food for the same. Her M4 rifle held 30 rounds, with 4 additional magazines secured in her vest. She also carried her sidearm with 3 clips, basic medical supplies, and enough C4 to make a statement if necessary, against an unknown number of hostiles, who apparently had inside information about her mission. The smart thing would be to find a defensible position and wait for rescue. Standard protocol dictated that missing personnel would be located within 72 hours. Maya had been through enough deployments to know that sometimes standard protocol was more like wishful thinking. She began moving down the mountain, using terrain features to mask her approach toward the village. If someone had compromised their mission, she needed to know how much they knew. More importantly, she needed to find out why this particular village had suddenly become so interesting to armed militants. The descent took 2 hours of careful movement. Maya had learned patience the hard way during her first deployment in Afghanistan. Rush toward danger, and you usually find it faster than expected. Take your time, observe, plan, and you might actually live long enough to make a difference. As she got closer to the village perimeter, details became clearer. The militants weren't locals. Their equipment was too new, too uniform. AK-74 rifles instead of the older variants typically seen in this region. Clean vehicles with recent maintenance. These were professionals. Maya found an overwatch position behind a stone wall that gave her clear sight lines into the village center. What she observed over the next hour changed everything. The militants weren't occupying the village. They were guarding it. More specifically, they were guarding something inside the village that required very serious security. She counted at least 20 armed personnel, but their positioning suggested they were protecting against external threats, not controlling the local population. Through her field glasses, Maya watched a pattern emerge. Every 30 minutes, 2 guards would enter a specific building and emerge 10 minutes later. The building showed no external signs of importance, but the security rotation was too precise to be accidental. Whatever was in that building was worth deploying professional operators to a remote Afghan village. Maya checked her watch. 0630 hours. Sunrise was coming, which meant her window for covert observation was closing fast. She needed to make a decision. The mission parameters had been reconnaissance and reporting. But with no communications and no extraction, those parameters were meaningless. She was effectively operating independently now, which meant she could adapt her objectives based on the situation she encountered. The responsible choice was to gather as much intelligence as possible and find a way to report back to base. The building under guard clearly contained something significant enough to justify this level of security. If she could determine what it was, that information might be valuable enough to justify the risks she was taking. Maya began planning her approach route. The village had two main entry points, but both were covered by overlapping fields of fire. However, the building they were guarding backed up against the village water well, which was built into a natural depression that would provide concealment for the last 50 meters. She spent another hour observing guard rotations and timing patterns. The militants were competent, but they were focused on external threats. They weren't expecting someone to already be inside their security perimeter. At 0800 hours, Maya began her infiltration. Moving through the village required every skill she had developed over 8 years of military service. She used morning shadows and natural terrain features to avoid sightlines. When she had to cross open ground, she timed her movement to coincide with moments when guards were focused in other directions. The approach to the target building took 45 minutes. By the time she reached the stone wall behind the structure, Maya had confirmed several important details. The guards were foreign nationals, probably Russian based on equipment and tactical positioning. They were protecting something inside the building that required around-the-clock security, and they were expecting extraction or resupply, based on the way they kept checking their communications equipment. Maya found a position against the back wall where she could listen through a crack between the stones. What she heard made her blood run cold. Confirmation from Moscow that the device is ready for transport. We maintain security until extraction arrives. How long until the aircraft? 6 hours. Maybe less if weather conditions improve. What about the American reconnaissance team? Eliminated. Our intelligence was accurate. They never reached the secondary extraction point. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. These people had detailed knowledge of her unit's mission parameters. They had eliminated her entire team, and were now preparing to extract something significant enough to require this level of operational security. She eased away from the wall and began planning her next move. Whatever was inside that building, it was leaving the country in 6 hours unless she could prevent it. With no communications and no backup, she was the only thing standing between these professionals and their objective. Maya checked her equipment one more time. 30 rounds in her primary weapon, 4 additional magazines, 3 clips for her sidearm, medical supplies, and enough C4 to damage but probably not destroy a hardened structure. Against at least 20 professionals who thought they had already eliminated the only threat to their operation. The mathematics weren't encouraging. But Maya had learned something during her 8 years of service that no amount of training could teach. Sometimes the most impossible situations were also the most winnable, because nobody expected you to try. She began moving to a position where she could observe the building's main entrance. If she was going to disrupt this operation, she needed to understand exactly what she was dealing with. The next phase of her plan would require precision, timing, and a considerable amount of luck. Maya settled into her observation position and began counting down the hours until their extraction arrived. 6 hours to figure out how to stop professionals who thought they had already won. She had been in worse situations before. Not many, but a few. This time, she was determined to be the one walking away. Maya spent the next hour developing what military planners politely called an asymmetric strategy. When you're outnumbered 20-1, conventional tactics become suggestions rather than requirements. Her observation of the guard rotation had revealed something useful. The militants changed shifts every 4 hours, but they staggered the changeover by 10 minutes between different positions. During those 10 minutes, there were gaps in their coverage that a skilled operator could exploit. The next shift change was scheduled for 1,200 hours. That gave her 3 hours to prepare and position herself for what would either be a textbook example of special operations tactics, or a very brief demonstration of why lone operators don't engage superior forces without backup. Maya relocated to a position that offered multiple escape routes, while maintaining visual contact with the target building. She used the time to conduct a detailed analysis of the security setup, mapping each guard position and identifying the most likely locations for their communications equipment. What she discovered was both encouraging and concerning. The militants were professionals, but they were configured for perimeter security against external assault. Their positioning assumed any threat would come from outside the village, approaching across open ground where superior firepower would provide the advantage. They weren't prepared for a threat that was already inside their security perimeter. However, their equipment and discipline suggested they would adapt quickly once they realized their assumptions were incorrect. Maya would have one chance to exploit their tactical blind spot before they reorganized to counter her presence. At 1,130 hours, she began the first phase of her plan. The village water well sat in a natural depression 20 meters from the target building. More importantly, it was connected to the building by an irrigation channel that ran beneath the structure's foundation. The channel was too small for a person to navigate, but it was large enough for other things. Maya carefully prepared one of her C4 charges with a timer mechanism, not enough explosive to bring down the building, but sufficient to create chaos and disable any sensitive equipment that might be stored near the foundation. The charge would detonate during the shift change when guards were focused on coordination rather than observation. She placed the device in the irrigation channel and set the timer for exactly 47 minutes. That would put the explosion at 1,217 hours, 7 minutes after the new guard shift began their positions. The next part of her plan required moving to the opposite side of the village, where the militants had established their communications post. Maya had identified the location by observing which guards carried portable radios versus which ones reported to a central position. Moving across the village in daylight meant accepting significant risk, but it also meant the guards would be less likely to expect infiltration. People who operate in darkness often become complacent during daylight hours. Maya used a route that took advantage of the village's natural layout. Stone walls, irrigation ditches, and farm buildings provided concealment as she made her way toward the communications position. The entire movement took 35 minutes, bringing her to within 50 meters of her secondary objective. The communications post was established in a 2-story building that offered good sightlines across the surrounding area. 2 guards at ground level, probably one more on the upper floor serving as an observer, standard setup for a temporary command post. Maya positioned herself where she could observe the building while remaining concealed behind a stone retaining wall. At exactly 1,200 hours, she watched the shift change begin. The guard rotation proceeded with military precision. Old guards reported to their relief personnel, provided status updates, and moved to rest positions. New guards assumed their posts and began their watch cycle. Just as Maya had observed earlier, there was a 10-minute window when the security posture was slightly degraded, while new personnel familiarized themselves with their areas of responsibility. At 1,210 hours, Maya began moving toward the communications building. She approached from the blind side, using the building's own structure to mask her approach from the guards positioned around the village perimeter. The ground-level entry was secured, but the building had external stairs leading to the upper floor that appeared to be unguarded. Maya reached the base of the stairs at 1,215 hours, 2 minutes before her charges would detonate. She climbed quickly but quietly, using techniques learned during close-quarters battle training. Each step was placed deliberately to minimize noise while maintaining speed. At the top of the stairs, she found a wooden door secured with a simple latch. Through the door, she could hear voices speaking in Russian. At least 2 people, probably 3 based on the conversation pattern. They were discussing transportation schedules and coordination with aircraft support. Maya checked her watch. 30 seconds until detonation. She drew her sidearm and prepared to breach the door. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine whether her mission continued or ended very abruptly. The explosion came exactly on schedule. Even from 50 meters away, the blast was loud enough to rattle windows throughout the village. Immediately, voices began shouting in Russian, as guards tried to determine what had happened and whether they were under attack. Maya used the confusion to breach the communications room. She came through the door fast and low, sweeping the room with her weapon while assessing threats and targets. 3 personnel inside, just as she had estimated. 2 operators at radio equipment. 1 officer with maps and coordination materials spread across a table. "Nobody moves," Maya commanded in English, keeping her weapon trained on the 3 Russians. The officer was the first to recover from surprise. "You are the American reconnaissance," he said in accented but clear English. "You are supposed to be dead." "Turns out that was optimistic," Maya replied, moving to a position where she could cover all 3 men while maintaining visual contact with the door. "Step away from the equipment." The radio operators complied immediately, but the officer remained at his position near the maps. He was calculating something, probably weighing the odds of overwhelming a single operator against the certainty of taking casualties. "Your unit is eliminated," the officer continued. "You have no extraction, no support, no communications with your base. What exactly do you expect to accomplish?" Maya glanced at the radio equipment. Professional-grade communications gear, definitely military issue. More importantly, she could see status indicators showing active connections to multiple frequencies. "I'm going to start by finding out what's in that building you're guarding so carefully," Maya said. "Then I'm going to make sure it doesn't leave the country." The officer smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. 1 woman against 20 professionals. Even if you had support, the odds would be impossible. "Maybe," Maya agreed. "But you're about to discover that impossible and unlikely aren't the same thing." She moved to the radio equipment while keeping her weapon trained on the 3 Russians. The gear was more sophisticated than anything she had worked with during her communications training, but the basic principles were universal. Maya began scanning through frequencies until she found what she was looking for. A channel that was receiving but not transmitting, which suggested someone was monitoring without actively participating in the conversation. She keyed the microphone and began broadcasting on standard military emergency frequencies. Any station, this is Falcon 7 requesting immediate assistance. I have enemy personnel and intelligence materials at grid reference." Maya read off the coordinates from the maps on the table. "Requesting immediate close air support and extraction capabilities." Static answered her for several seconds. Then a voice crackled through the speakers. "Falcon 7. This is Overwatch 2. We have your position. Confirm your status and personnel count." Maya felt relief flood through her system. Someone was listening. Someone was close enough to receive her transmission. "Overwatch 2. I have 3 enemy prisoners and intelligence indicating immediate threat to national security. Request priority handling. Copy Falcon 7. Be advised we have assets en route to your position. Estimated arrival 20 minutes. Can you maintain your current status?" Maya looked at the 3 Russians, who were listening to the radio conversation with growing alarm. "Affirmative, Overwatch 2. I can maintain." The officer spoke up. 20 minutes is not enough time. Our extraction arrives in 4 hours. Your aircraft will not arrive before our support eliminates your position." Maya considered this information. He was probably right about the timing. Even if help was coming, she needed to hold her position against superior numbers for far longer than her current tactical situation would allow. "Change of plans," Maya announced. She moved to the radio equipment and began adjusting settings. "We're going to have a conversation about what's in that building, and you're going to tell me everything I need to know to keep it from leaving Afghanistan." She had approximately 15 minutes before the guards downstairs realized their communications post had been compromised. After that, her position would become untenable very quickly. Maya began what military instructors call tactical interrogation. It's not about torture or coercion. It's about using time pressure, uncertainty, and logical deduction to extract actionable intelligence from unwilling sources. "Your operation is blown," she told the officer. "My people know where you are and what you're doing. The only question is whether this ends with everyone walking away or whether it turns into something that makes international headlines." She gestured toward the radio equipment. "I can contact your extraction and tell them to abort their mission. Or, I can wait for my support to arrive and let them explain the situation in a language you might find less diplomatic." The officer studied her with the calculation of a professional soldier evaluating options. You are bluffing. One person cannot maintain control of 3 prisoners while conducting radio operations and preparing for ground assault. Maya smiled. It was the same expression the officer had given her a few minutes earlier. You're absolutely right. This is impossible. She moved to the window and looked down at the village below. Guards were moving with purpose now, beginning to search for the source of the explosion. She could see at least 6 personnel approaching the communications building. But here's something interesting about impossible situations, Maya continued. They have a way of becoming possible when the people involved start making mistakes. She looked back at the officer. Your biggest mistake was assuming that eliminating my unit would eliminate the problem. Instead, it just eliminated the people who might have convinced me to follow standard procedures. The sound of boots on the stairs indicated that her window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Maya moved to her final position near the door, where she could control access to the room while maintaining cover. She still held the advantage of position and initiative, but that advantage was measured in minutes rather than hours. Last chance, she told the officer. Tell me what's in that building, or we find out together when my backup arrives. The radio crackled with an incoming transmission. Falcon 7. This is Overwatch 2. We have visual on your position. Be advised, you have multiple hostiles approaching your building. Do you require immediate support? Maya keyed the microphone. Overwatch 2. Stand by for my signal. Situation is developing. She looked at the 3 Russians one more time. 15 minutes until this gets very loud and very permanent. Your choice. The officer finally spoke. Nuclear material. Weapons-grade uranium. Enough to construct a device. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Suddenly, the level of security around the village made perfect sense. This wasn't just another intelligence operation. Where is it going? She demanded. Moscow. For analysis and disposal. Maya knew he was lying about the disposal part. But the destination was probably accurate, which meant she had stumbled onto something that could change the balance of power in multiple regions if it reached the wrong hands. The footsteps on the stairs had reached the door. Maya made her decision. She keyed the radio one more time. Overwatch 2. This is Falcon 7. I need immediate close air support on the building north of my position. Target contains weapons-grade nuclear material. Repeat. This is a WMD interdiction mission. The response came back immediately. Copy Falcon 7. Understand WMD scenario. Weapons hot. Stand by for immediate support. Maya looked at the officer. You should probably tell your people to surrender. Things are about to get very complicated. The door burst open as the first guards reached the communications room. Maya was ready for them. The first guard through the door moved fast, but not fast enough. Maya had positioned herself at an angle that gave her clear sightlines while using the doorframe as partial cover. Her first shot took him center mass, dropping him immediately. The second guard hesitated for a fraction of a second when he saw his partner fall, and that hesitation cost him everything. Maya's tactical training had emphasized one fundamental principle above all others. In close quarters combat, hesitation kills more people than bad marksmanship. She didn't hesitate. Her second and third shots caught the guard before he could bring his weapon to bear. He went down hard, blocking the doorway temporarily and buying her precious seconds to reposition. The officer had thrown himself behind the radio equipment when the shooting started, but the 2 operators were caught in the open. Maya covered them with her weapon while shouting instructions. On the floor, hands visible, don't move. Her commands were clear and direct. In situations like this, confusion killed both prisoners and captors. Outside the building, voices were shouting in Russian as the remaining guards tried to coordinate a response. Maya could hear boots on gravel as personnel moved to surround the communications post, professional soldiers adapting to an unexpected threat. She had maybe 2 minutes before they organized an effective assault on her position. Maya moved to the radio equipment and keyed the emergency frequency. Overwatch 2. This is Falcon 7. I am engaged with multiple hostiles at my position. Request immediate close air support on surrounding buildings. The response came back immediately. Falcon 7. We have visual on your position. Danger close engagement authorized. Keep your head down." Through the window, Maya could see guards taking positions around the building. At least 8 personnel, probably more that she couldn't observe from her current angle. They were moving with discipline and coordination, setting up overlapping fields of fire that would make any attempt to leave the building extremely hazardous. Then she heard something that changed everything: the distant sound of rotor blades. Not one aircraft, but several, approaching fast from multiple directions. Maya looked at the officer, who was listening to the same sounds with growing alarm. "That would be my backup arriving ahead of schedule," she told him. "You might want to consider ordering your people to stand down." The officer pulled out a radio and began speaking rapidly in Russian. Maya couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clearly intended to coordinate resistance rather than surrender. She made a decision that violated several provisions of the Geneva Convention, but fell well within the parameters of protecting weapons-grade nuclear material from international terrorism. Maya shot the radio out of the officer's hands. "Next one goes through your chest," she informed him calmly. "Tell your people to drop their weapons and move away from the building. Do it now." The officer looked at her with something that might have been professional respect. "You realize this will not end with your extraction. There will be consequences." "For who?" Maya asked. "The people who tried to smuggle nuclear weapons across international borders, or the person who stopped them?" She keyed her radio again. "Overwatch 2. Be advised, I have confirmed WMD materials in building approximately 50 meters north of my position. Recommend immediate secure recovery protocols. Copy Falcon 7. WMD recovery team is en route. Maintain your position until arrival." The helicopter sounds were getting louder, and Maya could now distinguish individual aircraft. At least 3, possibly 4 different rotor signatures. That meant a significant response force, probably including specialized personnel for handling nuclear materials. Through the window, she could see the guards below looking up at the sky with increasing concern. Their tactical situation had shifted dramatically in the past few minutes. What had been a simple cleanup operation was now becoming an international incident with potential WMD implications. The first helicopter appeared over the ridgeline at exactly 1,247 hours. It was a Black Hawk configured for close air support, with door gunners visible on both sides. The aircraft made a low pass over the village, clearly assessing the situation before committing to landing. Maya used her radio to establish direct communication with the incoming aircraft. "Overwatch 2. This is Falcon 7. I have 3 prisoners in the communications building and visual confirmation of approximately 8 additional hostiles positioned around the perimeter. Requesting instruction on how you want to handle the ground situation. Falcon 7. This is Shadow 1 Actual." The voice that came through the radio carried the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions in fluid tactical situations. "We have your position marked. Maintain your current status until we can establish ground control." The second and third helicopters appeared within 30 seconds of the first. One was another Black Hawk. This one configured for personnel transport. The third aircraft was something Maya had never seen before. A smaller, more agile helicopter that moved with the precision of special operations aviation. Shadow 1 continued transmitting. "Falcon 7. We need you to provide immediate assessment of the nuclear materials. Can you describe the security arrangement around the target building?" Maya moved to the window where she could observe the village center while maintaining cover. Shadow 1. Target building has reinforced construction with multiple guard positions. I observed regular rotation schedules and communication protocols, suggesting the materials are prepared for immediate transport. Estimated 4 to 6 personnel maintaining direct security on the building itself. Copy Falcon 7. We're going to establish a perimeter, and then move to secure the materials. What's your current prisoner status? Maya looked at the 3 Russians, who were listening to the radio conversation with obvious concern. 3 prisoners secured, no casualties among detainees. They have provided intelligence regarding the nature and destination of the materials. Outstanding work, Falcon 7. Maintain your position. The helicopters began their assault on the village with surgical precision. The first Black Hawk landed in a clearing approximately 200 meters from Maya's position. immediately deploying 8 fully equipped soldiers who moved with the fluid coordination of special operations personnel. These weren't regular army. Maya could tell from their equipment, movement patterns, and communication discipline that she was watching elite operators who specialized in exactly this type of mission. The second Black Hawk took up a position providing overwatch, with door gunners covering the approaches to the village, while the ground team maneuvered into position. The smaller helicopter, which Maya now realized was some type of specialized reconnaissance platform, began circling the village at low altitude. Within 5 minutes, Maya could hear coordinated movement around the communications building as the special operations team began clearing the immediate area. Their approach was methodical and professional, designed to minimize casualties while establishing control of the situation. Her radio crackled again. "Falcon 7, this is Alpha Team Leader. We're approaching your building now. Can you provide current status of your immediate area?" "Alpha Team, I have 3 prisoners secured in the upper floor communications room. No immediate threats in my position. I have visual on the target building and can provide real-time intelligence on any movement around the WMD location. Copy, Falcon 7. We're coming up to you now. Don't shoot the good guys." Maya heard careful footsteps on the external stairs, followed by a voice calling out, "Falcon 7. Alpha Team approaching your door. 3 personnel. Call sign Alpha 1, Alpha 2, and Alpha 3. Come ahead," Maya responded. Door is open. The first operator through the door was everything Maya had expected from special operations personnel. Medium height, lean build, equipment that looked like it had seen recent use in multiple combat zones. He moved with the controlled aggression of someone who had been in situations like this many times before. Behind him came 2 more operators, both carrying weapons and equipment configurations that Maya had only seen in specialized military publications. These people had access to resources and training that represented the absolute highest levels of military capability. Alpha 1 looked around the room, taking in the scene with professional assessment. "Outstanding work, Sergeant Chen. Clean tactical situation, prisoners secured, intelligence gathered, and WMD threat contained. That's what we call a successful solo operation." Maya was surprised that he knew her name and rank, but she kept her focus on the immediate situation. "Thank you, sir. The prisoners have provided intelligence about the nuclear materials. According to their officer, we're looking at weapons-grade uranium, prepared for transport to Moscow." Alpha 1 nodded and moved to the window where he could observe the target building. "We've got teams moving to secure that location now. What can you tell us about their security procedures?" Maya provided a detailed briefing on everything she had observed over the past 6 hours. Guard rotations, communication protocols, security weaknesses, and the timing of their planned extraction. Alpha 1 listened with the attention of someone who understood the tactical implications of every detail. "How long have you been operating solo?" Alpha 3 asked, while establishing communication with other teams. "Since 0, 3, 4, 7 hours. My unit was eliminated during the initial phase of the mission." Alpha 1 looked at her with something that might have been professional admiration. "Sergeant, you've been conducting independent operations against superior forces for over 12 hours. Gathering intelligence, securing prisoners, and interdicting a WMD smuggling operation. That's the kind of performance that gets people noticed at very high levels." Through the window, Maya could see additional special operations personnel moving around the target building with the same methodical precision she had observed from Alpha Team. Whatever organization these people represented, they had resources and capabilities that far exceeded anything she had encountered during her 8 years of military service. Alpha 2 approached the 3 Russian prisoners and began what appeared to be a much more sophisticated interrogation process than Maya's tactical questioning. He spoke fluent Russian and seemed to understand the nuances of the situation in ways that suggested extensive experience with international WMD interdiction. "The materials are secure," Alpha 1 announced after receiving a radio transmission. "WMD recovery team has confirmed weapons-grade uranium, approximately 12 kilograms. Configured for transport in specialized containers. Enough material to construct multiple devices if it had reached its intended destination." Maya felt a wave of relief mixed with exhaustion. The mission parameters had expanded far beyond anything she could have anticipated when she woke up this morning. But the outcome was better than she had dared to hope. Sergeant Chen, Alpha 1 continued. We need to discuss your immediate future. Operations like this one don't stay classified forever, and your performance today is going to generate interest from people who run much more interesting missions than routine reconnaissance. Maya wasn't sure what he meant, but she had learned to listen carefully when senior personnel started talking about career opportunities in vague terms. What kind of interest, sir? Alpha 1 smiled. The kind that involves situations like this one, but with better equipment, better training, and better support. People who operate independently against impossible odds tend to do well in special operations environments. He gestured toward the window where the WMD recovery operation was proceeding with clockwork efficiency. This mission succeeded because one person refused to accept impossible circumstances and adapted to conditions that would have overwhelmed most operators. That's not a common skill set. Maya considered this information. Special operations had always seemed like an interesting possibility, but she had assumed her background in communications and reconnaissance wouldn't translate to elite units. What would that involve, sir? Training that makes your current skill set look like basic preparation. Missions that make today's operation look like a warm-up exercise. Resources and support that most military personnel never see. Alpha 1 paused. And the opportunity to prevent situations like this one before they develop into international incidents. Alpha 3 approached with additional information from the prisoner interrogations. The Russians were operating under orders from a state-sponsored organization. This wasn't independent terrorism. It was a government operation designed to acquire nuclear materials for undisclosed purposes. Maya realized that her stumbling onto this operation had prevented something much larger than simple weapons smuggling. The implications of state-sponsored nuclear material theft were far beyond anything she had considered during her solo operations. How did you know to look for me? Maya asked. My communications were compromised. My unit was eliminated, and I had no way to signal for extraction. Alpha 1 exchanged glances with his teammates. We didn't come here looking for you, Sergeant. We came here because satellite intelligence detected unusual activity in this region. Finding an American operator conducting successful independent operations against a WMD smuggling ring was an unexpected bonus. He paused and looked directly at her. But now that we've found you, people in very high places are going to want to have conversations about your future assignments. The extraction helicopters were beginning to land in the village center as the special operations teams completed their securing of the area. Maya could see nuclear materials specialists in protective equipment beginning the process of safely recovering the uranium. What happens now? She asked. Now we get you back to base, where you'll provide detailed briefings on everything that happened during your solo operation. Then you'll have some very interesting conversations with people who recruit for missions that don't officially exist. Alpha 1 moved toward the door. But first, you're going to receive commendations that reflect the significance of what you accomplished today. Preventing nuclear materials from reaching hostile organizations is the kind of achievement that changes careers. Maya followed the special operations team out of the communications building and down the external stairs. Around her, the village was being systematically secured by professionals who made her 8 years of military experience look like basic training. As they approached the extraction helicopters, Alpha 1 turned to her one final time. Sergeant Chen, in 12 hours of independent operations, you eliminated multiple threats, gathered critical intelligence, interdicted weapons-grade nuclear materials, and prevented an international incident that could have destabilized multiple regions. That's the kind of performance that separates special operations candidates from regular military personnel. Maya looked around at the ongoing recovery operation. The specialized equipment, and the level of professional competence that surrounded her. What kind of missions are we talking about, sir? Alpha 1 smiled as they reached the helicopter. The kind where being abandoned behind enemy lines isn't a disaster. It's just Tuesday. As the aircraft lifted off, carrying Maya away from the mountain village where her military career had just taken a dramatic turn toward possibilities she had never imagined, she realized that sometimes the most impossible situations were actually the beginning of much more interesting opportunities. Through the helicopter window, she could see the village disappearing below them, along with the abandoned communications building, where she had made the transition from regular military personnel to someone who had caught the attention of organizations that operated in the shadows of international security. The mission that had started with routine reconnaissance and ended with WMD interdiction was over. Maya suspected that much more challenging assignments were just beginning.